a special session where we've got one of our most intrepid, one of our finest journalists who has worked on this issue for several years now, and is absolutely, absolutely considered the most credible voice on credible professional voice that is looking at the concerns surrounding Muslims, particularly over the last 9 years with the new ideology ruling India. We were fortunate. We got Summer. We actually nudged him quite a bit to write. And that chapter will be there with you soon. But it is such a clear, lucid explanation of what has happened. It's an explanation. It also goes into the why and what happens afterwards. So I'm sure that all of you will appreciate the work that has gone behind it, and Samar has done quite a lot of work to get to this level of insight in print, and now is a very solid voice on the net. I will plug this thing later on also, but right now I am insisting that all of you must go and subscribe to Article 14. Article 14 today is our most credible voice on what happens and all the concerns that us in this chat room are really worried about. It's an ultimate resource. I go through it very regularly. I've been campaigning for it throughout, and whoever I have managed to sell it to, very happy with the kind of content that comes. It is responsible content, it is insightful content, and it is quotable content. So with that, I will hand it over to Samar. What we'll do is over the next 20 minutes or so, hear Samar talk about what he thinks are the top few concerns, what he's worried about, what does he see in the near future, and then it will be over to you with whatever questions, and you will find that Samar answers them with brutal honesty and clarity. Over to you, Samar. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amir. You have, as usual, been too generous in your assessment. But thank you for all the support and for reading and listening. We're most grateful. What I'll do is I'm not sure everybody has, of course, read that foreword that you very kindly asked me to write. I'll just quickly run over just the basic points, and then I'll take it from there. Because the thing is, there's so many developments that have been happening in this country that parts of that itself seem, in a sense, dated. Well, not dated, but in the sense that there's so much more has happened, and I think more red lines have been crossed since then. So I'll just try to merge all these together. So essentially, when Amir asked me to write the foreword to the volume, there are lots of examples and data that I had used, and I'll run through some of them. But the basic point that I wanted to make was that these attacks against minorities and specifically against Muslims have become so ceaseless and normalized that they barely register with our increasingly radicalized society, a compromised and very government, meaning especially BJP-friendly mainstream media, and opposition politicians also, who used to be perhaps a voice against this, believe speaking up will hinder their chances against this whole Hindu first electoral juggernaut created by the BJP. I've also argued that far from being indications of a strong and resurgent India, as the government often claims under Modi that we are now strong, we have been stronger than we have ever been in 70 years or whatever, this unending list of actions against Muslims, other minorities, and their interests actually indicate how easily the whims of Hindu fundamentalists are becoming state policy. And this is in clear violation, an obvious violation of a raft of laws and constitutional provisions. All these laws that we have seen, especially these many cow slaughter laws, the so-called love jihad laws, conversion laws, all of these are constitutionally suspect. There are any number of retired judges and lawyers who have said this, not me. But the issue, of course, is that judicial challenges take some time. It depends on the judicial thinking, unfortunately, of the day as well, and leanings. But it has yet to reach that stage where these laws are challenged with any great seriousness. So what we have instead as currently is that we are caving in. The government machinery is caving in intentionally or otherwise. And that reflects not that strong and resurgent India, but it reflects insecurity. And apart from being morally wrong, and it is simply against this country's national interests, because it compromises our hard-won stability, and it alienates and marginalizes our largest minority. The turn against Muslims since 2014 has been very clear, beginning with all those initial lynchings and killings, etc. And this I've had personal experience with, because in my previous job we created two databases. One was to specifically check cattle lynchings, and the others was to specifically check hate crimes motivated by religion. And of course, of nearly 300 people we found who were lynched or victimized on account of their religion between 2009 and 18, Muslims were the victims in more than 60% of these cases. And to remind you, Muslims form 14.2% of the population, according to the 2011 census. That is what our database conceived. There was a clear, sharp spike after 2014, which indicated, of course, that these attackers felt empowered and emboldened. And what to me was most disturbing was that in these cases, a third of them, the police first arrested and registered cases, and these were all based on mere allegations by Hindutva groups against those who had been attacked, battered, etc. So the first lynchings, were used as excuses for selling or eating beef. Over the years, we have barely seen these excuses. Very often now, and I'm one of those who reads, 4 newspapers every day. Every now and then you'll see something in page 7, a few paragraphs, because it's no longer even news. And we struggle to make sure that this stays in the middle of the news cycle. And as if that were not enough, of course, as I said, most BJP ruled states have brought in new laws against cattle transport, slaughter, conversion, love jihad, etc. And we found that police and Hindu vigilantes acting in concert. Cases are filed, the violence is easily used, and against minorities who may be doing nothing more than nothing really, praying, eating, walking, or just living. And repeatedly, if not me, as I said, a lot of people have pointed out these appear to go against the constitution, but challenge, of course, is a long drawn affair. What happens is that when the mob begins to dictate state policy, the state begins to echo the demands and concerns of the mob. And that, in a nutshell, is what is happening in the Modi era. And once the state gives in, a new normal is established, and recovery to the old can take, a generation or more. And we have had a lot of examples of that in Indian history. The pogrom against Sikhs again after Indira Gandhi's assassination. For those of you who are old enough will remember that it seemed like it took a long time before some kind of we went back to the old normal, so to say, if you can say that. And by encouraging these non-state actors to radicalize society and blur the line between them and the state, the BJP is repeating the follies of the past on a much more grander and much more ominous scale. And that is the biggest problem that we have now. Now, coming to those red lines I was talking about, all this I've written in my foreword, and I've talked a lot about it. But I'm sometimes breathless by the amount of atrocities that happen lately. First of all, before going into that, I'd like to just mention that communal riots, attacks on minorities are not new in India. For those of you who know, there has been Hashimpura, where the provincial armed constabulary in the UP shot down, blatantly shot a whole lot of Muslims. There's been the Nelly massacre, etc. So we have had all these in different points of history. So what then has changed now? To me, there's never been such support from the ruling party and endorsement by such a large number of Hindus. And I regret to say that, I'm a Hindu myself, and I regret to say that this endorsement, in whatever fashion, in different levels and different grades, there is clearly endorsement of this government and what they stand for. The support for the ruling party and what it does has had a cascading effect. And this is the biggest problem. Police, judges, the media, all have either been compromised, complicit, or they have been sidelined or acted against. So there is a whole a universe that is arrayed against this. It's not just the question of a ruling party stating its own anti-minority, anti-Muslim feelings. It's that this has cascading effect. It is not yet. I don't think it is yet. But if it does not end or is not turned back, it will become a perfect storm against Muslims and other minorities. Just to refer back to the point of making India weak, I think we have seen the potential of what can happen when the state caves in like this and blatantly starts supporting specific, especially majority viewpoints in Manipur, where the state has completely disappeared. And as many people have pointed out, if this had happened in, say, Kashmir or any other so-called mainland state, there would have been nothing else on the news cycle. But of course, because this is happening in Manipur, it's still there, but not to the extent that it has. Armories have been looted, more than looted. Entire thousands of weapons have been handed over from police armories to majoritarian groups in Manipur. And the kind of anarchy and ethnic cleansing we have seen there, I think this is a warning. And the state appears to have given up. It's not clear what they can do. The Prime Minister, as we know, of course, and as now quite common, has said absolutely nothing of Manipur. Instead, he's gone to the US. The Home Minister went to Manipur, said we will normalcy has returned. That was a month ago, and things have only worsened since then. Despite the army being deployed, despite the paramilitary forces being deployed, nothing has happened. So that, to me, in a microcosm, is what could happen in India if something like this is not reined back, is not pulled in. Let me just refer to the past week and month, but actually just 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, the Chief Public Relations Officer of the Southeastern Railway talking about the Balasore train accident, and some of you, of course, may have heard some attempts by these Hindu right-wing fundamentalist groups to communalize even that by sheerly spreading completely fake news. It's gotten so bad recently, yesterday and today, that the Chief Public Relations Officer, and I just heard him, he said that these reports are entirely false, and those reports said that some staff are missing or absconding. And of course, those they said were Muslim staff, and the CPR himself said that nothing of the sort has happened. Then this last week, there have been all kinds of things. There were these young Muslim men who were flogged. Initially, it wasn't clear who was doing the flogging. It turned out later on it was the police, and the police are openly admitting this, that who were protesting the demolition of a 30-year-old dargah, I think, in Gujarat. Then yesterday I saw a Muslim family on the ghats of Varanasi being told to leave because they were told that the place was for Hindus alone. And there's been that purely fake news was enough for Hindu fundamentalist groups to try and cleanse the Uttarakhand town of Purola of Muslims. Fortunately, in that case, the police held firm, which leads me to the larger point that if the local administration and the police simply obey the law and the procedures, most of these outrages can be stopped and that clock can be turned back. We have seen what happens when it goes the other direction. Recently in Maharashtra, where there's been a rash of massive and often violent protests against Facebook posts eulogizing Tipu Sultan or Aurangzeb. You may or may not like, Aurangzeb, Tipu Sultan, whatever, but none of this is a crime. Yet, there have been masses of people, and there has been very violent protests, and you have had the Deputy CM himself freely issuing dog whistles, promising action against Aurangzeb ki aulado, whatever he said. And then in Damo, Madhya Pradesh, we saw how the state, how government officials get overwhelmed when there is political pressure to act a certain way. Even in Damo, Madhya Pradesh, which has now been ruled, of course, by the BJP for so many years, and we see this even in UP, that despite everything, there are government officials, local police officials who try to do the right thing, try to follow the rule of the law. Now, in Damo, what happened was that there's a school has been partially demolished because some people saw a poster of students who had done well in the exam, toppers. And they saw that some female students had Hindu names and their heads were covered. And the police found nothing wrong with this whatsoever. The school said this is part of our suggestions that we give for our students. You don't require hijabs, or maybe Muslim girls require hijabs, and they require others also to cover the head. They request them to. If they don't, then they said there's not very much they can do. We have a reporter right now who's talking to them, and yesterday he just spoke to a Hindu student who confirmed, who was one of those girls who was on that poster. A demolition squad shows up because there were alleged irregularities, which of course we know is all nonsense. These are just excuses now for demolitions. When the school pointed out that they had been given 3 days time, they went away saying, yes, that's true. We ourselves gave you 3 days time to explain these irregularities. Then the Home Minister, the Chief Minister, and the BJP party chief stepped in, promising action. For what, it was unclear. Within hours, the demolition squad came back and the demolition began. Now, this is where I think red lines are now being crossed again. We're on the verge of crossing, or have already crossed red lines. The excuses that are being used in acting against Muslims are fig leaves. They quote the law, but increasingly no law is even quoted, as was evident in the Gujarat flogging, where the police admitted to the flogging as a deterrent. In Damu, again, the rule of law was entirely dispensed with, because finally when the officials came, under political pressure, they just went ahead and did something that no law allowed them to do. All these to me indicate a gradual escalation, and not just in Islamophobia, but officially sanctioned violation of basic human and constitutional rights. To a point where we must now ask ourselves, how long before no excuse is needed? How long before even the fig leaves are discarded and we firmly enter, and I hate to say this, but how long before we firmly enter Nazi territory? The Uttarakhand episode, before the police and some Hindu landlords held firm, and there were a lot of Hindu landlords who did hold firm, was on the verge of being a crystal nut. The night of the broken glass, as it was called, when which accompanied the rise of Hitler, when Nazi stormtroopers began the pogrom against the Jews by smashing shop windows of Jewish businesses and sacking them. How long, I think we have to ask now before we go into that. Now, is there any hope in this being turned back? I think there is, but the issue is that this has to, there can only be for me, from two reasons. I think the official part has to be left aside. Officials only get their cues from the government and from society. So it is incumbent on Hindu society to speak up. And I think there are glimpses we see of people actually realizing that it is not enough to be a bystander, that they need to stand up and speak up and be there and make their presence felt. Much more important is that there can only be a political solution to this. In Karnataka, of course, as you know, the government has been sent back. The BJP government was sent back. One reason, I'm not saying this is the reason at all, but this is definitely one strong reason. And you heard this in the Malnad, in the belt of Mysore, Mandya, etc. You saw any number of farmers saying that these cow slaughter laws have ruined our businesses, because all the cattle merchants who used to come, they were mostly all Muslim. He said they have stopped coming entirely now. 3 days ago, the Karnataka government announced that it is the cabinet has decided to scrap the modification that the BJP government made to the cattle slaughter laws in Karnataka. That very same day, there was a huge protest in many small towns in South Karnataka by the Raita Sangha, the Farmers Association, which is extremely strong. And coincidentally, there they said that they wanted 3 laws repealed: APMC law, some other law, I can't remember which. But they said the cow slaughter law must be repealed because this has, really affected us. And the thing about these laws, all these laws, have come at a time when the economy has been depressed. So in a sense, you are enacting these laws at a time when the economy is already depressed. And it is just, it's just bizarre and so damaging that whatever modes of that people use to make a living, even those you are trying to demolish. And you are not, of course, obviously hurting only Muslims, you're hurting a whole lot of others as well. We have seen that in UP also with the leather industries and a whole lot of other related industries. So this is where we stand right now. So when that political push comes, and when there is a political push for change, then I think there is always hope. And we find, I think, that whenever there is a political changeover, then the entire conversation starts changing. We have seen that happen dramatically, actually, in Karnataka. And don't forget that the support from the BJP in Karnataka has stayed pretty much the same. It has not changed that much. But the other so-called silent majority is no longer silent any longer. And now people are vocally, openly speaking up, saying, cut this, remove this law, change this thing, etc. The government also has been emboldened. For example, in coastal Karnataka, where there has been, we've seen so much vigilante action, and that is, of course, been by Hindu and Muslim groups against any kind of interfaith relationships. But obviously, the Hindu groups under the BJP rule often felt far more empowered and protected by the police than the Muslim groups did. Um, and now we have actually the same police, the exact same police force now have created, as you know, Amir, have created this anti-moral policing squads. And they are roaming around now, which of course could have been done long back. So the police, especially, as I said, even in a radicalized state like UP, where even there sometimes you see them trying to do the right thing, but things are very different between UP and here. In Karnataka, for example, the police and administration tended to do the right thing despite the rise of the BJP. When there were about, I think, a few people had been shot in police firing in Mangalore. I think 3-4 were killed. There was a BJP government during anti-CAA protests. The first thing the chief minister did was to announce compensation for those who had been killed, because that is how it has always been in Karnataka. And the CM was a BJP CM, Yediyurappa. Of course, within 48 hours, he had to revoke that because he got a call from Delhi saying, how can you possibly announce compensation? And he announced an inquiry also into the shooting. So, I'm always hopeful. Many people, who read my stuff always say you're the harbinger of doom. But that doom is a reality, unfortunately. You have to be either blind or complicit if you do not recognize it. But I always believe that there is a lot of hope, and we have to just work at amplifying that hope and participating in any kind of events and any kind of change that push this hope forward.
Thanks so much, Samar. Thanks for putting all that in so comprehensively and so concisely. Ghazala, would you still like to ask that question?
I just saw that question just now, in fact.
In some ways you have answered it, but I think she's asking for a broader explanation that why did the BJP lose?
So I think it is could be dared to read it as a vote against Hindutva. It is not entirely a vote against Hindutva, but it is partially a vote against Hindutva, because even among BJP supporters in a state like Karnataka, even among BJP supporters, there have been enough people who I know have been saying, boss, this is too much. Where exactly are we heading like this? We have seen that. There's no question about that. So is it a vote against Hindutva? I would say yes and no. So it is not, in the sense that, as I said, the support remains strong. A city like Bangalore, for example, their vote share has actually gone up by, I think, how much was it? 1% or something. It's actually gone up. So of course, the middle classes and upper classes are the most radicalized and tend to be the biggest supporters of Hindutva. What was surprising to me was, in a place that was supposed to be the second hotbed of Hindutva, so to say, which is the whole Belgaum Karnataka region, which is the borderlands of the Marathi and Kannada speaking areas, where there had been a string of these incidents, communal incidents in over the last few years. There was a huge rejection of the BJP. I think there's something really surprising, and that is one of the places where they had serious declines. So I think even among this Hindutva supporters and Hindutva votes, there is what I always say, the silent supporters and the vocal supporters. And the vocal supporters, of course, are the ones we see. But you can see this, that there are people who believe that we have gone too far. I say this with so much, well, not authority, but so much confidence, because I see it in my own family. Parts of my family are extremely radicalized. My father left his own WhatsApp group some years ago because he couldn't take some of this. He castigated, since he was the elder in that group, he castigated some of his nephews when some of these Islamophobic posts were put out. And of course, because it was him, they said, sorry, sorry, we won't put out. And then he found that still continuing, he had no patience. He left the group himself. But even there, I can see some change. So I'm hopeful. But overall, the vote against Hindu, it's very hard to say, but while I may be hopeful, the support for Hindutva remains extremely strong. And it seems to be that people are like so committed to it now, they virtually don't know another world. And they're like, and so much fear and fake news has been drilled into their heads. They actually believe all of this stuff, that if I'm talking of the hardcore Hindutva supporters, they actually believe now if the BJP goes, there will be this flood of things that we have never seen before. All the stuff that they have grown to think of as reality, land jihad, love jihad, all of this will suddenly come true or something. So I don't know if that answers their question, but